There are moments when silence is louder than any voice, when the heart aches with a restlessness it cannot name. It is not simply the emptiness of unmet desires or the nostalgia of childhood memories, it is something deeper, a whisper beneath the surface of all other longings. Humanity has always known it, a hunger that no possession, no success, no fleeting love could fully satisfy. Augustine gave words to it when he confessed, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." That restlessness is not a defect, but a signature, an interior mark that reveals the divine origin of the soul. It is the echo of a parent we have not fully seen, but whose presence we feel in every cry for meaning. The Urantia Papers remind us that religion begins not in doctrines, but in the living experience of this longing. In the hidden places of the psyche, the adjuster whispers like a fragment of eternity embedded within us. Religion is the answer of the soul to this inward touch. Even before we name God, before we construct theology, the heart already leans forward, straining toward an invisible horizon. Rumi sang of it when he said, "The longing you feel is the return message of the beloved." Longing is not absence, it is presence in seed form. It is the kingdom already breathing beneath the soil of consciousness, waiting for recognition. To feel this longing is to discover that life itself is a question aimed at the infinite. Science may measure distances between galaxies, but even in the cosmic vastness, the human heart dares to ask not only what, but why. This question, this hunger, is the doorway. The stars spread out above us like an open book, and in their silent glow we sense the same mystery burning inside our chest. The cosmos is immense, but it does not diminish us. It amplifies the interior voice, reminding us that the kingdom is not foreign to the galaxies, but the very pulse that sustains them. The kingdom begins here, in the ache that refuses to be silenced, in the yearning that no world can quench. It is not a prison, but a compass, a fire pointing beyond. And when we honor this longing instead of suppressing it, we awaken to the possibility that our lives are not small, isolated accidents, but threads woven into an eternal tapestry. The whisper becomes audible, "You were made for more." If the longing is the spark, then destiny is the horizon it illuminates. The Urantia revelation describes God as the source and center of all reality, and yet also the most intimate companion of every soul. This paradox, the infinite dwelling within the finite, is the key to understanding the cosmic path. Our inner restlessness is not merely psychological tension, it is the gravitational pull of eternity, drawing the human toward its source. To recognize the kingdom within is to begin tracing the road that leads to the farthest stars. Consider how every tradition has sensed this trajectory. The mystic hears it in the quiet of prayer. The poet glimpses it in beauty. The scientist feels it in the sheer intelligibility of the universe. Jung would call it the archetype of the self, the image of wholeness latent in every psyche, pressing us toward individuation. The Gospel of Thomas distills it into a single saying, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." What dwells within us is not a private treasure, but the seed of a cosmic unfolding. To enter it is to participate in a destiny larger than time. Modern cosmology speaks of an expanding universe, galaxies rushing apart, as if space itself were breathing. For the soul, this expansion is a mirror of its own vocation. We are not built for collapse into self, but for widening circles of communion, until our love stretches as far as God's own. The longing for eternity is not escape from the world, but a summons to transfigure it, to live even the smallest act as a resonance of an infinite story. Every prayer, every gesture of forgiveness, every moment of fidelity participates in this expansion. Thus, the kingdom is both whisper and horizon. It begins in the wound of longing, but ends in the embrace of a universe made whole. To awaken to this truth is to realize that no step of our journey is wasted. The inward ache and the outward stars are chapters of the same revelation. The cosmic path is not abstract. It is written in the way we carry our hunger, the way we listen to its direction, the way we dare to walk forward. And in the distance, the promise shimmers. The longing is not in vain. It is the seed of eternity planted in the soil of time, and it will grow into a destiny beyond imagining.
There is a paradox written at the very center of existence. The greatest path to the stars begins not with telescopes nor with rockets, but with silence in the heart. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God, he turned the gaze of humanity inward. The kingdom of God is within you, he taught, according to both the Gospel of Luke and the Urantia Papers. In saying this, he did not minimize the grandeur of galaxies or the architecture of heaven. Rather, he revealed that the first threshold of the cosmic path lies in the sanctuary of interiority. The Urantia Papers affirm that the kingdom is not a system, nor an institution, but a living relationship with the Father through the adjuster, the fragment of God indwelling the mind. Papers 107 through 112 describe this adjuster as a divine presence so intimate that it guides each soul as if no other existed. The adjuster whispers direction, calls forth courage, and interprets the meaning of life through the very structures of consciousness. To live in harmony with this presence is to discover sovereignty of the Spirit, a sovereignty not of domination, but of freedom. It is the mastery that arises when faith liberates the human from fear and aligns will with divine purpose. Faith then becomes the foundation of the inner kingdom. Paper 196 of Urantia speaks of the living faith of Jesus, a faith that was not rigid or dogmatic, but flexible, courageous, and profoundly relational. It was not belief about God, but trust in God. To trust is to stand on ground invisible yet unshakable. Viktor Frankl, in his reflections from the abyss of suffering, would later echo this truth. Even in the darkest conditions, the human retains the freedom to choose an attitude of meaning. Jesus embodied this long before it was theorized. His interior sovereignty was unbroken by opposition, betrayal, or crucifixion. This inner kingdom is not a private garden disconnected from the world. Rather, it is the root system of all transformation. Jung would call it individuation, the process by which the psyche integrates its fragments and the self emerges as guiding center. In Jesus, we see individuation elevated, the alignment of the human will with divine intention. His consciousness was a bridge, fusing finite experience with infinite purpose, modeling for us what it means to become whole. To walk into this inner kingdom is not to escape reality, but to anchor oneself in the deepest layer of reality. In contemplative prayer, in silence, in acts of mercy, in fidelity to truth, even when costly, the kingdom breathes. Every such act affirms that spirit is stronger than chaos, that meaning can pierce absurdity, and that presence transforms exile into communion. The sovereignty of the Spirit is discovered not in controlling circumstances, but in aligning one's inner compass to the divine horizon. And once this alignment begins, the journey toward the cosmic horizon is already underway. The human heart, once aligned with the adjuster, does not remain still. Transformation within radiates outward like ripples moving from a single stone cast into water. The Urantia Papers describe not only the indwelling fragment of God, but also the destiny of mortal ascension through the mansion worlds, the Urantia life, and beyond. To awaken to the kingdom within is to step onto a path that stretches from the private silence of conscience to the orchestras of the universe. Interior fidelity becomes the first rung on a cosmic ladder. Why does personal transformation have universal significance? Because the cosmos is relational at its core. Stars are born in clusters, galaxies weave into superclusters, and even the laws of physics reveal a web of interdependence. Likewise, in the spiritual order, no soul rises alone. Papers 170 through 171 emphasize the kingdom as fraternity, a communion of liberated beings. Every step into the inner kingdom releases energy that contributes to the collective evolution of creation. Love is never contained. It radiates, connecting the destiny of one to the destiny of all. This is why Jesus' emphasis on the kingdom was revolutionary. He did not invite people into a private mysticism detached from society. He invited them into a faith whose first effect was interior, but whose second was social and cosmic. The Sermon on the Mount is not an abstract ethic. It is the architecture of a new humanity, grounded in mercy, humility, hunger for justice, and love of enemies. These are not small moral ideals. They are cosmic practices, resonating with the very laws of the universe. To forgive is to align oneself with the structure of reality. To love one's enemy is to echo the gravity of God that holds galaxies together without partiality. Jung sensed that the self was larger than the ego, a transcendent center linking individual with cosmos. The Urantia revelation confirms that this link is not metaphor, but ontology. The indwelling God fragment is both compass and connection, ensuring that the private journey of transformation is inseparable from the universal unfolding of creation. Each act of fidelity within the kingdom contributes to the destiny of universes. Each small surrender is magnified into cosmic resonance. The horizon is vast, and yet, paradoxically, the way to touch it is through small, daily acts of interior fidelity. A prayer spoken in solitude, a silent act of mercy, a refusal to betray truth. These are not insignificant. They are the steps by which the soul participates in the cosmic symphony. To live the kingdom within is to begin already the destiny of universality. And when the adjuster fuses with the human soul, the personal story becomes an eternal story, woven into the fabric of divine history. The inner kingdom is thus no cul-de-sac of spirituality. It is the gate to the horizon. Jesus revealed this path, that only by turning within do we discover the road beyond, and only by aligning the soul do we learn to walk toward the stars. The heart becomes the first universe conquered, and in that conquest, the cosmos itself opens like a horizon without end.
When the Urantia Papers unveil the story of Michael of Nebadon, they describe not a distant sovereign, but a ruler who chose the most paradoxical road to authority, the road of service. Paper 119 recounts the 7 bestowals, each a descent into the lives of his creatures, culminating in the incarnation as Jesus of Nazareth. Unlike earthly kings who climbed to thrones through conquest, Michael descended to the humblest conditions to learn, to serve, and to embody love. His authority was not seized, it was earned by compassion. In the prologue of John's Gospel, we hear, "In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God." The Logos, divine reason, creative word, did not remain abstract. The Logos became flesh, entered the fragile world of human history, and walked the dusty roads of Galilee. This paradox reveals the cosmic pedagogy. Divinity does not demonstrate sovereignty by distance, but by intimacy, not by detachment, but by presence. The 7 bestowals of Michael are like chapters in a curriculum of love.
In each, he entered the conditions of his creatures, experiencing their limitations from within. He identified not merely as ruler, but as participant, friend, brother. This was kenosis, the self-emptying described in Philippians 2. He did not count equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. Such emptying is not weakness, but strategy. It disarms power by offering vulnerability, revealing that divine authority rests in solidarity, not supremacy. The Kabbalistic symbol of Tifereth, the heart of the tree of life, helps us interpret this mystery. Tifereth is the balance point, the beauty born of harmony between the severity of justice and the expansiveness of mercy. In the bestowals, Michael embodied Tifereth, majestic yet humble, authoritative yet gentle, cosmic yet intimate. His sovereignty was not imposed, but recognized by all who encountered him. He carried beauty because he carried balance, the fusion of divine strength and compassionate presence. In the language of the cosmos, then, the bestowals are not anomalies, but archetypes. They show that the path to lasting leadership, whether of universes or human hearts, is through service. To condescend in love is to ascend in truth. Each descent became a step upward in authority, not because of domination, but because of recognition. The universe bows to love, not to force. Authority anchored in love cannot be rivaled, because it is not resisted, it is welcomed. For this reason, Michael of Nebadon is sovereign not only by title, but by testimony. His universe trusts him, because he has lived among his creatures, suffered with them, and shown them the way. The cosmic map he leaves for us is clear. True greatness lies not in self-exaltation, but in service. The kingdom within mirrors this cosmic truth. Just as Michael won sovereignty by descending, so each soul ascends by surrendering, by giving itself in love. The cosmic path is traced not upward first, but downward, into the humility of love, the soil from which eternity grows. Why should love and not power be the criterion of universal government? Because love alone reflects the nature of God. The Urantia Papers teach that God is not primarily power, though he holds it, nor primarily knowledge, though he embodies it. God is above all Father, and a father's authority is measured not by control, but by care, not by coercion, but by nurture. Michael's bestowals, culminating in the life of Jesus, dramatize this principle for an entire universe. The ethics of the cosmos, therefore, cannot be built on fear or compulsion. Force may secure temporary obedience, but it cannot inspire trust, and it certainly cannot foster growth. Love, however, evokes freedom. It invites the soul to rise, to imitate, to participate. Authority rooted in love generates loyalty, not by demand, but by attraction. It becomes magnetic, drawing beings towards higher levels of being, because it awakens in them the echo of their own divine origin. This is why Jesus could say, "Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant." This was not moral rhetoric. It was a revelation of cosmic law. In the vast structures of Nebadon, greatness is equated with service, sovereignty with sacrifice, glory with humility. This reversal is not weakness, but truth. The universe itself is wired to run on love. Galaxies spin because they are held in relationship. Lives grow because they are nurtured in communion. What physics shows in matter, the spirit reveals in meaning. Existence thrives on relationship, not domination. The kenosis of Michael, the choice to enter vulnerability, becomes a template for all cosmic leadership. Even seraphim and higher orders of beings imitate this principle in their ministries. They bow not because of subjugation, but because love has proven itself trustworthy. When Michael accepted the human condition, fear, fatigue, hunger, temptation, he did not diminish his divinity. He displayed it in its most radiant form. Authority was clothed in empathy, majesty revealed in kindness. The bestowals, therefore, are not mere episodes in cosmic history. They are the constitution of Nebadon. They reveal the law behind the laws, that the universe recognizes as sovereign only that which serves in love. This ethic penetrates even into our personal lives. When parents guide their children through compassion, when leaders serve their communities rather than exploit them, When friends carry one another's burdens, they mirror the structure of universal sovereignty. They enact, on a small scale, the same authority by which Michael rules stars. The implication is breathtaking. To live the ethic of love is to participate already in cosmic governance. Each time the kingdom within chooses forgiveness over vengeance, humility over pride, fidelity over betrayal, it enacts the very principles by which the universe is held together. Love is not simply a sentiment, it is the infrastructure of reality. The stars shine because God loves, and when we love, we align ourselves with the same gravitational law. Michael of Nebadon, through his bestowals, shows us that destiny is not seized, but received, not demanded, but offered. The cosmic path is carved not by force, but by fidelity. And so in the end, the sovereignty of Jesus is universal because it is singularly trustworthy. In him, the Logos became kenosis, Tifereth became flesh, and love became the axis on which universes turn. To walk his path is to discover that the smallest acts of love are echoes of the greatest law of the cosmos.
Long before Jesus walked the roads of Galilee, Urantia bore the scars of a deep fracture. Papers 53-54 of the Urantia Revelation speak of the Lucifer rebellion, a revolt not of flesh and blood, but of mind and spirit, a choice made in arrogance that severed vast domains from the circuits of divine communion. The result was quarantine, isolation from the currents of truth, disconnection from the networks of light that sustain the universes. Urantia became a wounded world, a place where confusion of values and the cult of power took root in the soil of human history. In the mythologies of ancient cultures, this wound is mirrored. Orphic tradition spoke of the soul's exile from its divine origin. Philosophers like the Stoics felt the fracture as a reason wounded, a cosmos in disorder, where logos no longer shone with clarity. Hannah Arendt, centuries later, would name another dimension of this same fracture, the banality of evil, the terrifying normalcy with which falsehood and cruelty become accepted as routine. Evil does not always appear monstrous. Often it becomes ordinary, woven into the habits of institutions and the blind inertia of crowds. On Urantia, this banality was amplified by isolation. Without the full guidance of planetary administration, compromised by betrayal, the human race groped in the dark. Cults of power and domination flourished, and the inner compass of spirit was muffled by the noise of fear and confusion. Religions fractured into systems of control instead of doorways to freedom. Political life often reflected more the shadow of rebellion than the light of fraternity. The cosmic wound manifested in everything, in the fear of death, in the suspicion of neighbors, in the enslavement of many by few. And yet, even within quarantine, the adjuster continued whispering. The fragment of the divine remained faithful when planetary structures failed. The human longing for truth, though distorted, never vanished. This is why myths of paradise lost, golden ages, and heroic restorations appear in every culture. The memory of what was lost is also the seed of what could be healed. The wound itself became the stage upon which the promise of redemption would one day stand in flesh. Into this fractured world, Jesus was born. The Urantia Papers make clear that his mission cannot be separated from the backdrop of rebellion. His was not merely the story of one prophet among many, but the decisive visitation of Michael of Nebadon to a quarantine spear. His incarnation was cosmic therapy, a sovereign choosing to heal the wound from within. By living among us, he did not erase the rebellion instantly, but he planted in human soil the antidote, truth lived as love. The quarantine, then, was not only punishment, but context. It magnified the significance of every choice, every word, every act of mercy that Jesus embodied. In a world confused by counterfeit values, he clarified what mattered most.
Where power sought to dominate, he taught service. Where falsehood thrived, he revealed truth not as abstract doctrine, but as living presence. Where fear paralyzed, he breathed courage. His life was light injected into darkness, not distant radiance, but embodied brilliance. The rebellion of Lucifer had argued that the universe did not need God, that creatures could flourish by severing ties with the source. Jesus' life was the living refutation of that lie. In his faith, his intimacy with the Father, and his sovereignty expressed through service, he demonstrated that union with God is not limitation, but fulfillment. The rebellion promised freedom, but delivered isolation. Jesus revealed that true freedom is communion. The very existence of his life on Urantia was a verdict against the rebellion and a promise to all quarantined worlds. Healing is possible. In this light, quarantine becomes paradoxically the womb of revelation. The very isolation made the incarnation of Jesus luminous. What better way to restore a wounded world than for its creator to dwell within it not as a tyrant, but as brother and healer? The fracture of Urantia thus became the setting for the greatest disclosure of divine love in Nebadon. The story does not end with diagnosis or rebellion. It moves toward restoration. Papers 66-67 describe how planetary leadership faltered, but the coming of the Spirit of Truth, paper 194, reopened the channels of communion. The crucifixion did not lift quarantine immediately, but the resurrection and Pentecost were like cracks in the walls of isolation, allowing light to pour in again. Healing began not by erasing history, but by transforming it from within. Jesus' presence reframed the human story. He did not undo exile in one stroke. Instead, he taught men and women to live as though they never were abandoned. His gospel was a promise that the circuits of truth would reopen first in the intimacy of the soul and eventually in the cosmic fellowship of restored universes. Even in isolation, no soul was cut off from God. Every adjuster remained faithful. Every prayer still reached the source. Every act of love still echoed across eternity. The rebellion was real, but it was not final. Like a wound that scars but also strengthens, Urantia's isolation became the very soil of greater intimacy with God. Jesus' life transfigured the wound into a doorway. He showed that the fracture of history can become the fountain of hope, that even in a quarantined world, the kingdom can bloom. The Spirit of Truth continues to whisper across time, calling every generation to participate in the healing. Thus, Urantia is not forever defined by its rebellion, but by its redemption. The mission of Jesus reframes quarantine not as a prison, but as a stage for divine love to demonstrate its power. Healing, though still unfolding, has already begun. And with it, the destiny of this wounded world is no longer exile, but integration, no longer silence, but song.
There are moments in cosmic history when eternity bends low and touches time, and none more luminous than the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. Paper 122 of the Urantia Papers frames it as no ordinary nativity, but the culminating bestowal of Michael of Nebadon, the eternal Son choosing to become flesh. And yet the paradox of this incarnation lies in its strategy. The infinite entered not through the palaces of power, but through the fragile threshold of human vulnerability. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of avatars, divine descents into the world to restore balance when Dharma falters. Horus, in Egyptian myth, was born as the child of light destined to confront the darkness. Across cultures, humanity has intuited that divinity must sometimes come close, even embodied. But the incarnation of Jesus is of another magnitude, not myth alone, but history infused with eternity. It is the Word that was with God, the Logos through whom all things were made, choosing not to dominate creation from above, but to share its cradle. Why vulnerability? Because love can never coerce. Authority born of power commands obedience, but authority born of love awakens trust. By arriving as a helpless infant, dependent on Mary's arms, Joseph's care, the hospitality of strangers, Jesus demonstrated the true axis of divine strength. The creator of stars learned to breathe, to cry, to nurse, to wait. The one who balanced galaxies submitted to the rhythms of growth, weather, hunger, and fatigue. Vulnerability became revelation. This strategy overturns human assumptions about divinity. Instead of fire and thunder, there is tenderness. Instead of majesty that intimidates, there is fragility that invites. The Incarnation teaches that the road to eternity does not bypass humanity, but sanctifies it. Every human stage, childhood, adolescence, work, friendship, loss, was embraced by the infinite. Nothing in our story is too small to hold eternity, for eternity has passed through it. The birth of Jesus, then, is not sentimental, but seismic. It means that time is not exile, but meeting place, that flesh is not prison, but temple, and that vulnerability is not weakness, but the greatest strategy of love. The infinite became finite, not to annihilate finitude, but to make it luminous, to reveal that within the limits of human life burns the fire of divine presence. Every detail of Jesus' nativity shimmers with symbolic resonance. Paper 123 describes how his childhood unfolded under ordinary circumstances, and yet, through the eyes of faith, these circumstances become cosmic parables. The stable in Bethlehem is not merely a humble shelter. It is a declaration that divinity is accessible to all, not monopolized by elites. The shepherds, marginalized and poor, become the first witnesses of eternity's arrival, showing that the kingdom's gates swing open to the least expected. Symbols are not decorative, they are doorways. The Rosicrucian tradition speaks of spiritual birth as the flowering of hidden seeds within the soul. In the Incarnation, humanity itself becomes such a doorway. The face of a child, fragile and dependent, becomes the very icon of God. The universality of this symbol explains why across cultures, the figure of the divine child appears as archetype: innocence, beginning, potential, renewal. But in Jesus, this archetype takes flesh in irreversible history. Why is the humanity of Jesus the key to universal access? Because if God is revealed in pure power, then only the strong can relate. But if God is revealed in vulnerability, then every soul, weak or strong, broken or whole, can find entry. His humanity means no one is excluded from communion with the infinite. The sick, the poor, the wounded, the doubter, all find themselves reflected in his story. Divinity and flesh erases distance without erasing difference. The Incarnation also redefines glory. Instead of associating divinity with detachment, it identifies it with nearness. To touch the face of Jesus is to touch the bridge between time and eternity. To watch him grow, labor, smile, and suffer is to witness the infinite choosing not only to be above, but among. His humanity does not veil divinity, it reveals it in its most approachable form. The Rosicrucian image of spiritual rebirth, where the soul is born anew within the body, finds its cosmic fulfillment here. In Jesus, humanity itself becomes the temple where divinity dwells. He is not an idea of God, but the embodiment, not a myth of light, but light incarnate. This humanity is the universal key. To see him is to see the Father. To know him is to know the path. The Incarnation is, above all, a bridge. It is the infinite reaching into the finite, not to annihilate it, but to uplift it. Through Jesus, eternity stepped into time without losing its vastness, and time received eternity without losing its texture. This is the great paradox. The cosmic descent does not diminish either side.
It unites them. For Urantia, isolated by rebellion, this bridge was essential. Humanity groped under confusion, longing for meaning, and the incarnation anchored that meaning in history. No longer was God a distant abstraction. He had walked in the dust, spoken in human tongues, shared meals, laughed, wept, and died. Eternity had entered the temporal fabric, redeeming it from within. This bridge also reveals the dignity of the human story. If God chose to dwell in flesh, then no human life is trivial. Every act of kindness, every struggle for justice, every breath of prayer participates in the same bridge, linking the ordinary to the eternal. The incarnation abolishes the split between sacred and profane. Everything becomes sacrament when touched by divine presence. Other traditions glimpsed this mystery in shadow. The Bhagavad Gita spoke of avatars descending for the sake of balance. Egyptian myth revered Horus as son of light born into struggle. These echoes prepared the world for the fullness of revelation. In Jesus, however, the descent is not symbolic alone, but incarnational. He does not merely visit humanity, he becomes humanity. Thus, the incarnation is not an event confined to Bethlehem, but a principle reverberating through time. It proclaims that God is not far, that heaven bends towards earth, that eternity can be carried in human hands. To look at Jesus is to look into the mirror of the cosmic path, the infinite walking with the finite, love wearing the face of a brother. And this bridge remains open, not only in memory, but in presence, for the Spirit of truth continues to make eternity intimate within every heart.
When the Urantia Papers 124 to 129 describe the hidden years of Jesus, they do not dwell on miracles or grand teachings. Instead, they trace a life profoundly ordinary, working, studying, grieving, persevering. Yet within these apparent banalities lies a pedagogy as cosmic as any sermon. These were the years when Michael of Nebadon, sovereign of a universe, learned the rhythms of being human, not from thrones, but from the carpenter's bench and the quiet struggles of a household. In Nazareth, Jesus shouldered responsibility early. After Joseph's death, the burden of providing for the family fell heavily upon him. His hands, which had fashioned worlds, now calloused under wood and stone. The workshop became a classroom, teaching patience, precision, endurance. Every task became a sacrament of presence, every object crafted a meditation on care. Teresa of Avila would centuries later speak of the school of patience, where small fidelities prepare the soul for great visions. Jesus lived that school daily, transforming chores into liturgies of love. Family life, too, was a crucible. Managing siblings, resolving disputes, supporting his mother, these challenges were no less demanding than cosmic councils. To rule universes with compassion, one must first learn to navigate the tensions of a household without losing tenderness. The negretto of human experience, the dark, heavy phase of alchemy, was his training ground. Only by embracing the limits, frustrations, and losses of ordinary existence could he transmute them into aurum, the gold of divine wisdom. Loss sharpened this pedagogy. Grief carved empathy into him. He knew the silence of absence, the ache of watching loved ones suffer, the loneliness of shouldering burdens without recognition. These were not detours, but essential steps, learning firsthand the sorrows that wound humanity, so that his sovereignty would be clothed in mercy. Thus, the years of obscurity were not wasted, they were formative, crafting in him the resilience and compassion required to reign through love. The greatness of the human years lies in their ordinariness. By immersing himself in common tasks, Jesus revealed a cosmic truth. Eternity is prepared not in palaces, but in kitchens, fields, and workshops. The incarnation sanctified every detail of life. But it was in the hidden years that this sanctification matured. These were the cosmology of the ordinary, the revelation that what seems small on earth resounds in heaven. Buddha's story of leaving the palace to confront suffering parallels this truth. Jesus, however, did not leave comfort to discover pain. He was born into it and embraced it without escape. His enlightenment was not attained in isolation under a tree, but in the noise of a bustling family, the sweat of work, the weight of community expectations. By remaining faithful within such contexts, he elevated the ordinary to cosmic dignity. Urantia Paper 140 would later distill this ethic in the Beatitudes, blessings pronounced on the meek, the grieving, the merciful, the pure in heart. These were not abstract ideals, they were the fruits of his hidden years. To declare the poor in spirit blessed, one must have known poverty of circumstance. To comfort those who mourn, one must have felt the sting of loss. To proclaim mercy, one must have practiced it first among kin and neighbors. The Beatitudes were not inventions, they were revelations born from lived apprenticeship in the ordinary. This transfigures our lives. It means no act is insignificant. A gesture of care, a word of truth, a day of honest labor, these too are cosmic acts when aligned with spirit. Jesus demonstrated that eternity begins in the smallest fidelities, that the ladder of ascension is built from daily rungs. He showed that love is not waiting for grand opportunities, but shining in simple consistency. The alchemical nigredo becomes aurum precisely here. The heat of daily pressures, the grind of ordinary labor, the disappointments of human limitation, all become fuel for transformation. By remaining faithful in these crucibles, Jesus taught that sovereignty is forged not in escape from the ordinary, but in its embrace. The hidden years are often overlooked because they lack spectacle, yet they are the clearest revelation of how God rules, not through force, but through fidelity to love in the smallest circumstances. In Nazareth, Michael of Nebadon did not govern by decree, but by daily sacrifice, by showing up with presence, by persevering in service. This is sovereignty in seed form, humble, patient, enduring. What Jesus lived in obscurity illuminates the cosmic path for us. We are not asked to perform miracles to align with eternity. We are asked to remain faithful in our workshops, in our families, in our griefs, to treat neighbors with dignity, to forgive, to persevere. These are the same lessons the universe honors. Sovereignty is not power exercised, but love practiced. Thus, the human years are not a pause between incarnation and mission. They are the mission, distilled. They remind us that the path to eternity begins where we stand, in the textures of our daily lives. Heaven's pedagogy is hidden in carpentry, caregiving, conflict resolution, and quiet endurance. Each moment is a rung in the ladder toward the cosmic horizon. When he later proclaimed the kingdom of God, Jesus spoke from experience. He had lived it in obscurity before declaring it in public. His reign as Michael was legitimized not by spectacular power, but by compassion learned in the school of the ordinary. His sovereignty was not theoretical, it was embodied, tested, proven. And so, the years between ages 12 and 30, though silent in spectacle, thunder with meaning. They revealed that love is the highest form of governance, and that to rule with mercy requires first learning to live with patience. They proved that eternity touches earth not only in miracles, but in shores, not only in sermons, but in silence, not only in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary.
At the Jordan River, the flow of history converged with the flow of eternity. Paper 136 of the Urantia Papers portrays the baptism of Jesus not merely as a ritual cleansing, but as the decisive moment when Michael of Nebadon fully embraced his human mission and received the open confirmation of his divine identity. The heavens opened, and the voice declared, "This is my beloved Son." In that instant, vulnerability met sovereignty, and the long-hidden years gave way to unveiled mission. The waters of the Jordan carried symbolic weight far beyond geography. In mythic traditions, rivers often mark thresholds, crossings from one world to another, from ignorance to illumination. The Styx in Greek mythology, the Ganges in India, even the Jordan in Israel's own memory, each represents liminality, the place where old life ends and new life begins. For Jesus, immersion in the river became a sign of full solidarity with humanity's journey and the moment of consecration to his cosmic path. But baptism was followed by the desert. Immediately, the Spirit led Jesus into solitude, where temptation pressed him on every side. Bread for hunger, spectacle for validation, dominion for power. Each test mirrored humanity's deepest illusions. Papers 136 to 137 emphasize that in refusing these offers, Jesus redefined sovereignty. He would not feed the world by coercion, impress it by force, or dominate it by fear. His kingdom would be built not on manipulation, but on trust, not on compulsion, but on love. This desert trial was not failure, but breakthrough. It clarified the path, stripped away ambiguity, and crystallized fidelity. Lao Tzu once said that the Tao is invisible, and yet it directs all things. Similarly, Jesus' mission would be invisible to worldly power, yet transformative of the universe. The desert sharpened his focus. Authority would come not through shortcuts, but through faithfulness to the Father's will. The adjuster within, the Spirit upon him, and his own human will aligned in perfect harmony. Thus, baptism and temptation form one drama. The river revealed his identity, the desert tested his fidelity. Together, they forged the clarity that the mission required, and from this clarity emerged the next great step, the proclamation of a kingdom unlike any the world had ever imagined. From the desert, Jesus emerged not defeated, but luminous. His first teachings, as captured in papers 141 to 170, unveiled the DNA of the kingdom. Unlike earthly empires, the kingdom was not built on borders, armies, or wealth. It was a reality of interior freedom, fraternity, and love, a sovereignty that could not be toppled because it was not rooted in external structures, but in the human heart aligned with God. The Sermon on the Mount became the manifesto of this kingdom. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the meek, the merciful, those who hunger for righteousness. These words inverted the logic of the world, dethroning power and enthroning humility. They revealed that the kingdom is not for the privileged few, but for all who dare to trust in love over fear, truth over lies, mercy over vengeance. To hear these words was to be invited into a new order of existence, one both profoundly human and deeply cosmic. Here, too, lies resonance with Da'at in Kabbalah, the sphere of knowledge that unites higher and lower worlds. The kingdom is Da'at embodied, a bridge between heaven and earth, eternity and time, divine and human. By teaching forgiveness, generosity, and fidelity, Jesus was not giving moral advice, but revealing cosmic architecture. The universe itself is sustained by mercy and truth, and the kingdom mirrors this at the scale of human life. The Urantia Papers emphasize that Jesus' kingdom was never to be institutionalized. It was not a church, not a system of law, not a political movement. It was a living fellowship, a communion of souls transformed by the Spirit. Love was its constitution, mercy its law, service its crown.
In the kingdom, greatness is measured not by how many obey you, but by how many you lift. Thus the charter of the kingdom was not written on stone, but inscribed in living hearts. Each parable, each act of healing, each word of comfort embodied its statutes. It was the kingdom as interior sovereignty, truth lived, love enacted, freedom embraced. This was the breakthrough, to live a reality immune to corruption because it was rooted in God. The culmination of this charter was not merely in words, but in a gift, the Spirit of Truth. Paper 194 describes this as Jesus' greatest legacy, the invisible presence poured into the world after his departure. Just as the baptism opened heaven over him, Pentecost opened heaven over all who believed. The Spirit of Truth became the living continuation of Jesus' presence, the seed ensuring that the kingdom would never be confined to one place or one time. Through this Spirit, the manifesto of the kingdom became dynamic, adaptive, alive. It spoke differently in each culture, yet always with the same heartbeat: love one another, live in truth, walk in freedom. No institution could monopolize it, no doctrine could exhaust it, no empire could contain it. The kingdom breathed wherever souls dared to align their wills with God. The implications are cosmic. The kingdom is not only preparation for survival after death, but participation in the eternal now. To live in mercy is already to live by the laws of the Urantia worlds. To practice forgiveness is to anticipate the fraternity of universes. To walk humbly is to harmonize with the gravitational pull of love that holds galaxies together. What began at the Jordan River, what was tested in the desert, and what was announced on the hillside continues to ripple across eternity. Thus, baptism, breakthrough, and charter are not past events, but ongoing realities. Every time a soul surrenders pride for love, the Jordan flows again. Every time truth is chosen over spectacle or domination, the desert is overcome anew. Every time mercy is extended, the charter of the kingdom is ratified once more. The DNA of the kingdom is not fragile, it is eternal. Written in spirit, enacted in love, guarded by the Spirit of Truth, it will expand until it embraces all creation. What was whispered in Galilee will one day resound as the music of universes. The kingdom of God is within you, and its horizon is without end.
In the Garden of Gethsemane, the weight of worlds pressed upon one human heart. Paper 182 of the Urantia Papers describes Jesus not as an untouchable figure of stoic calm, but as one who trembled, agonized, and yet chose fidelity. Fear was real. Anguish was real. He prayed not once, but thrice, "Let this cup pass," and yet each time surrendered with the words, "Not my will, but yours." In that surrender, sovereignty was revealed. The greatest power is not to avoid fear, but to stand within it and remain faithful. Mystics later saw in this night the archetype of the dark night of the soul. John of the Cross would write centuries later of the soul stripped of all consolations, forced to walk by naked faith alone. Jesus embodied that path in its fullness. He felt abandonment, silence, dread, yet he did not flee. By staying present, he transfigured agony into alignment, showing that sovereignty begins in the unseen depths of will. In Kabbalah, Gevurah symbolizes just strength, discipline that restrains chaos and channels energy toward justice. Gethsemane is Gevurah in action, strength not of domination, but of restraint, fidelity, and inner mastery. While soldiers prepared to seize him, while disciples scattered in confusion, Jesus stood sovereign. The rebellion of Lucifer had argued that divine rule was coercion. Gethsemane proved it to be fidelity, the unshakable alignment of love in the face of terror. This sovereignty was invisible to the world, yet radiant to the cosmos. Angels looked on and recognized in his surrender not weakness, but the highest form of power. He could have fled, could have resisted, could have called legions of celestial hosts, but he chose to remain. In that choice, history turned. Love enthroned itself, not by escape, but by endurance. From Gethsemane, the path led inexorably to Golgotha. Papers 183 to 189 recount the betrayal, the trial, the scourging, and the crucifixion, not as tragic accidents, but as the final revelation of love enthroned. The cross, a Roman instrument of humiliation, became the universe's most radiant symbol of sovereignty. For on it, power exhausted itself, but love endured. The Rosicrucian tradition sees the cross as the union of opposites, vertical and horizontal, heaven and earth, divine and human. On Golgotha, this symbol took flesh. Heaven bent downward, earth stretched upward, and in their intersection hung the Son of Man, arms open to all directions. The cross was not defeat, but coronation, not collapse, but consummation. His throne was wood and nails, his crown thorns, his robe mockery, but his reign was real. Jesus' crucifixion shattered the logic of domination. Power had done its worst: betrayal, violence, torture, derision. And yet, even from the cross, his words unveiled sovereignty. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." In forgiveness, he ruled. In compassion for the thief beside him, he reigned. In trust at the moment of death, "Into your hands I commend my spirit," he sealed his sovereignty in love. Mystical traditions have called the cross a portal, not because suffering is good in itself, but because fidelity transforms suffering into passage. Through the cross, Jesus did not escape death. He walked through it, converting it into doorway. In cosmic terms, this was the enthronement of love as the ultimate law. The rebellion's lie was answered forever. True sovereignty is service. True power is compassion. True victory is love, faithful to the end. The enthronement of Jesus on the cross was thus not the end of rebellion, but its unmasking. The lie of power was exposed, the truth of love unveiled. Sovereignty was not lost. It was revealed in a form the world could not comprehend, but the cosmos could never forget. From that day forward, the axis of history shifted. The cross became the emblem not of defeat, but of the law of love, the throne from which Jesus reigns eternally.
On the third day, the stone rolled away, not merely from a tomb in Jerusalem, but from the heart of the cosmos. Paper 189 of the Urantia Revelation declares that Jesus rose not as a ghostly vision nor as a return to mortal life, but as a Urantia being, the luminous bridge between the material and the spiritual. His resurrection was not a reversal of death, but its transfiguration, the unveiling of survival as destiny for every soul aligned with the Spirit. This dawn was not only about him, it was about all. By rising, he confirmed that what dwells deepest in us is not annihilation, but continuity. Teilhard de Chardin envisioned humanity moving toward the omega point, the convergence of all creation into Christ. Easter is that vision in seed form, the first human to fully live the cosmic destiny, proving that matter, mind, and spirit can harmonize and ascend together. Yet resurrection was only the beginning. In paper 194, the Urantia text describes the coming of the Spirit of Truth, poured out on all flesh. No longer would presence be confined to one body in one place. Now every heart in every corner of the world could feel the inner companionship of the Christ. The Spirit of Truth does not speak in dogmas or dictate creeds. It whispers freedom, courage, love. It sharpens perception, warms conscience, guides steps. Vedanta spoke of moksha, liberation into the eternal self. The resurrection expands this into relational hope. Liberation is not isolation, but companionship in the Spirit. Rumi wrote, "Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form." Easter confirms, love never disappears. It returns, transformed, multiplied, shared. The Spirit of truth is that shared presence. Jesus had walked beside his disciples, now he walks within. The resurrection confirms survival, but the Spirit universalizes it. Each one becomes participant, bearer, and channel of the kingdom's light. If resurrection is dawn, ascension is horizon. Paper 47 describes the mansion worlds, 7 spheres of progressive growth where the soul awakens after death. There, the fragments of self once bound to flesh unfurl towards spirit. The adjuster, described in papers 107 to 112, is the divine fragment guiding each step until one day fusion occurs, human and divine united, destiny sealed in eternity. This is the ascension ladder. It is not myth, but map. From Urantia, a quarantined planet scarred by rebellion, souls are lifted step by step toward universes of light. The resurrection of Jesus was the prototype, the assurance that no obstacle, not death, not chaos, not rebellion, can prevent the soul's ascent if it wills to follow the Spirit. Teilhard envisioned humanity moving toward the Omega point. The Urantia book expands. Omega is personal, relational, sovereign, the Father revealed in the Son, and the Son indwelling in us through the Spirit. The Vedantic seeker yearned for moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Here the cycle is not merely broken but crowned, ascent into service, fellowship, co-creation. In paper 48, we glimpse the Urantia life. Schools of wisdom, communities of love, training for cosmic service. Resurrection opens that door. The Spirit of truth accompanies us even now. The adjuster draws us upward. It is not a fantasy, but a curriculum, designed for freedom, fidelity, fullness. The resurrection was the first rung, but the ladder extends beyond imagination, from mansion to system, from constellation to super-universe, until the human soul stands radiant in paradise, embraced by the source from which it first emerged. What does this mean for the reader now? It means that no tear is wasted, no faith unnoticed, no act of love forgotten. Resurrection is not only about Jesus, it is about the guarantee that your story, every story, is woven into the great ascension. The Spirit of truth is the daily reminder you are not alone and the path is real. Urantia's history, marred by rebellion and quarantine, might tempt despair. Yet it was precisely here that the Creator chose to reveal himself. The worst became womb for the best. Teilhard saw love as the energy of convergence. The resurrection proves it. Death could not sever it, betrayal could not break it, time could not erode it. Love abides and love lifts. Mystics across cultures have intuited this. The Sufi longs for union with the beloved, the Buddhist trusts in the awakening beyond illusion, the Christian clings to Easter morning. All point to the same reality. Survival is not wishful thinking, but cosmic law. Life is designed to continue, consciousness to expand, and spirit to ascend. Thus the arc closes, from the whisper in the heart to the horizon of eternity. The kingdom begins within, but it does not end there. It stretches outward, upward, beyond. Each reader is invited to step onto that ladder of ascension now, not waiting for death, but living resurrection already, guided by the Spirit, shaped by the adjuster, destined for the Omega, where God is all in all. This is not abstraction, it is promise. Resurrection was the seed, the Spirit of truth the companion, the ascension ladder the path, and hope is the fruit, the assurance that nothing is lost. All is gathered, and love reigns forever.
The kingdom never asked for heroic feats beyond reach. It asked for fidelity, small, luminous acts repeated in the silence of the day. Jesus revealed that the cosmic path is not paved with spectacular gestures, but with the humility of daily choices, forgiving when anger seemed justified, sharing when scarcity whispered caution, praying when despair invited silence. The Evangelio de Tomé dares to say, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known." Knowing oneself is not narcissism. It is naming the secret fidelities, discovering the temple where God already prays within. And in that discovery, one realizes the smallest act of fidelity reverberates across universes. The cosmos is not indifferent to our hidden choices. The great temptation is to postpone fidelity, to imagine that someday, when the world is calmer or when strength is greater, the kingdom will finally be lived. But the call of Jesus was always immediate. Follow me now. Love your neighbor today. Forgive this very moment. The Urantia narrative insists that Jesus embodied continuity. He did not segment sacred and secular. He prayed while working, loved while walking, taught while eating. His fidelity was not reserved for temples or festivals. It was incarnated in dust, bread, touch. Rumi whispers, "There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground." Each way is a fidelity, a way of saying yes to presence. The future of religion, says paper 196, depends not on institutions, but on individuals who dared to live as Jesus lived. Continuity, not event. Daily fidelity, not seasonal ecstasy. The kingdom is universal destiny, but it begins with the fidelity of a single soul at dawn, deciding to live in truth, deciding not to betray love. Hope, therefore, is practical. It is not only promise of the afterlife, but fuel for the present. The mansions of ascension await, but they are rehearsed here. In patience with a child, in courage to resist injustice, in gentleness with one's own wounds. To live hope today is to participate in the eternal already. And now the book closes, but the clinic of the kingdom continues. The reader is not merely informed, but summoned. Summoned to make fidelity a vow, simple and brief, yet immense in consequence. Perhaps it could be whispered like this: "Today, I choose to live as if the kingdom is real, within me and among us. I will let love guide my steps, truth guard my words, and hope sustain my breath. My fidelity will be small, but it will be faithful. My heart will belong to the eternal." Such a vow does not require perfection. It requires presence. It is a seed that, once planted, reshapes the soil. In time, it aligns the finite with the infinite, the inner with the cosmic. And so each act becomes liturgy, each breath a prayer, each day a rung in the ladder of destiny. The Evangelio de Tomé again, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Fidelity is precisely that, bringing forth what is within, the Christ already present, waiting to be lived. So go, not alone, never alone, but accompanied by the Spirit of truth, by the adjuster within, by the eternal love that governs galaxies. Go and let your fidelity, however fragile, echo in eternity. For in the mathematics of the cosmos, every act of love becomes infinite.